Excuse me. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you all again. Been a while since we've done a live show, so we'll give people a chance to join if they're available. Maybe 5-10 minutes. And then we'll start a discussion about John 8:58. As many of you probably know, I uploaded a video the other day about John 8:58. Made easy video. And in that video, I told you I'd be back this Saturday, right? To have a live show, discussion, answer any questions you have, right? This is your chance, or one of them at least, a good opportunity to discuss anything you want about John 8:58. Now, specifically, I'll be talking about the Syriac translations and the Syriac texts of John 8:58, and I will also be discussing the Greek text more. I tried to stay out of the technical discussions of both of those and pretty much everything else in the other video, but I think we covered it nonetheless, right? I don't think you always have to get so technical, right? You know, the way some Trinitarians are today, other groups too, but it's so funny, you know. They're like, do you have a degree in Greek, a degree in this? I'm like, I don't have a degree in English, but I'm pretty good in English too. And yes, I've studied it formally and informally for a long time. How about you? Okay, so then you should know exactly what I'm talking about, right? We should have no problems. Yet that's all we have, our problems with some of these guys who claim to know more than everybody, at least, or more than us, right? So they're just like very in your face with stuff. Maybe the Greek Orthodox pagans are like the punishment to the Protestant Greek scholar pagans, right? And the apologist pagans. And the Greek Orthodox pagans come in and kind of, no, okay, you guys, you're Protestant. You're not the true church and you don't know Greek, right? Kind of gives the Protestants a little taste of their own medicine, the way they like to bully other people who don't, learn Greek through their Trinitarian schools, which I'm not saying those are all bad schools and don't teach you things, but they're in the context and often restricted to, specific understandings of these things. You know, learning languages is really not that hard. And Greek is more challenging than some, and that's because it's not spoken the way it was back then, even in modern Greek today. Right? It's different. Not just in pronunciation, although that's very similar in many ways, because of the standardization that took place after the time of Jesus, right, when the New Testament started to become formed, canonized. So in any case, we'll talk about that another time. But the Greek language, right, the grammar and the pronunciation, of course. But again, it was standardized at one point in a way that does allow for a better lineage of pronunciation from modern day back to like the 3rd, 4th century. Either way, again, I'll talk about that more another time. I've done a lot of studying of that over the last 30 years. And either way, it's just so funny to me, you know, how these people claim to know so much Greek. And yet, you know, I've debated some of their best Greek scholars who know Greek just fine, right? They've studied it their whole life pretty much, and apologetics. And we don't have any problems, you know, understanding each other. We just don't agree. You know, these terms, like I said in the Made Easy video, God, these things, those are not hard terms to document, define, right? You do have to have the proper context and understanding of the author and the time in which certain things are written and different beliefs by different groups. But that's, again, that's why we're not Trinitarian, right? The Bible doesn't provide us with that kind of connectivity. It doesn't present God in this Trinitarian way that they say it is. So we get things like John 8:58, right? The whole I am thing. And we get Trinitarians who will say, you need to study Greek, right? You don't understand. I am, right? That's claiming eternality. That's claiming the divine name right there. And we've shown, I'm not going to go over everything unless you have a question about it, but I'm going to summarize a few things. Like I said in the Made Easy video, Rob Bowman did probably the best apologetic defense of the John 8:58 issue on the Trinitarian side. That's why I directly took issue with every single one of his main arguments, and we have set them aside. We have defeated them. I'm confident of that, and I would do it again anytime. We've even had others who aren't Watchtower people, but were favorable to our position, like Jason Bedun, for whom I have high respect, but I don't always agree with, right? I don't agree with him on Sharp's rule, and I think he could have just read my excursus and gotten that right and been pretty much close to perfect in his discussions of many of these issues. Either way, I think he did a great job, and he was smart enough to see the examples that I provided from the Old and New Testament. I unraveled Bowman's attempts to set aside these New Testament examples, and I provided new examples for the first time from the Greek Old Testament. The Greek Orthodox pagans didn't provide them. The Greek scholars on the Protestant side didn't provide them. Not Bowman, not any of them. I did, okay? And I'm not saying that's a big deal. I just cared enough to find it. So when Bedun saw that and he used it, he defeated Bowman again, because Bowman didn't defeat me ever in John 8:58 or any of those discussions. I've gone into the New World Translation footnote issues. I've shown he was wrong there and Hurley was more correct there. There are some issues with the Watchtower there. I dealt with those. Okay. We give Bowman credit. Bowman did do a lot of research and a lot of work, and I do give him first place among Trinitarian apologists for his discussions of John 8:58. Pretty close on John 1:1 too, but we dealt with those too. So, nevertheless, we still have the same issues, do we not? Okay, people are not reading my stuff, and if they are, they're ignoring my stuff. I had a person just the other day who commented. I blew him away because I'm not going to tolerate this stuff. Right, I've had, like I said in that Made Easy video that I got that comment on, oh, when are you going to talk about John 18 and why they fell back when he said I am? Are you serious? Okay, so right there, you've proven that for over 30 years, you've avoided my discussion, my arguments, my presentation, all of it, right? What am I supposed to do? Just let you ignore all that and start all over again because you showed up one day totally ignorant without having researched a thing? So it blows my mind, right? These guys don't care. They don't listen. All they do is care about their Trinitarian doctrine. That's it. The Protestants took them forever to find out they were part of the Dragon Church, right? And they still didn't figure out just how far back that Dragon Church made it hard to see the Christians who are the weed in Matthew 13. So there's all kinds of stuff. It's so interesting. We're going to start with a text here. It's good to see you all. Let me bring up a text here before we get going. And then we're going to talk about the Syriac New Testament, John 8:58. I'm going to kind of bring clarity to you if you are confused at all about that. Again, if you look at my JWD Defended Editions, which I will show again, I provided information on the Syriac translations and texts. But, I didn't really, beyond noting what they say and how they support what we're saying, we'll get to the Aramaic Bible in plain English, or New Testament in plain English, right? Gone in plain English, right? Either way, a lot of people don't listen to what I say, or they don't read what I say, or don't even have it to read. So what am I supposed to do, right? It's not my problem. I've spent a lot of time or a lot of years, and I've helped solve all those problems. And if you still have them, they're not my problems to solve. I've already done that for you. I don't understand why people don't read things, why they don't care as much as I do. I guess, people just don't care the same about things, right? And I have to accept that. I have to realize, hey, on this subject here, about this, you just care a little more than some people. So adjust your expectations, right? I guess. I don't know what else to say. If someone provides a discussion for me when I was coming in and Watchtower, through to today, right? When I'm aware of a discussion that gives me information that I want, right, about God and about, hey, there's almost nothing I won't do to get that information. You know what I'm saying? And I know some of you are like me, and we have to be practical, right? We can't jeopardize, our responsibilities just for more information, even though it might be necessary. We've got enough, but there's more, and there's always more. We have to be balanced. But let me tell you something. I would let almost nothing stop me from getting my hands on something that I consider like spiritual gold, right? Look at the way Watchtower people just wait on Watchtower's new light, right? And look at that new light. What kind of new light do we get there? Some of it, the Watchtowers, I've said, and I'll agree, and I was there. Had some good people. They probably still do, but they've gone through different periods, right? These groups all do. But Watchtower, right, was built around, even with its good people and its good aspects, right? It was basically built around this false chronology, right? This failure to properly accept your place and not put yourself in a place you shouldn't be in the first place, right? No, you're supposed to be a servant, lowly, humble, with almost nothing, barely hanging on, and certainly fighting to hang on. And if you have special ability and blessing, then yeah, if you've hung on, you might sit before kings. But we're not here to be kings, right? We don't rule yet here. So there should be none of that here. Everyone should be helping everyone who's actually deserving of help. And some people, no, of course, they're not. Like I just said, they could have something available to them for 30 years and never get it. Does that sound like someone who's deserving of help to you? Doesn't to me. All right, we still try to help people though, right? We're not mean. But we're not here to be taken advantage of. We're not here to constantly go over the same things with people. That seems to be the problem, right? Either we've got a lot of trolls who just love to waste their time wasting our time, but we're talking about the truth and unwinding false doctrine, so it's never really a waste of time. It's still, though, right? How many times do you need to hear it? Sometimes you need to hear it because they keep saying it and we forget it. But how quickly are we forgetting these things? I don't forget any of this stuff. And I study and I stay in aware of these things. So, again, maybe we're just not all the same. I get that. But there are certain things that if you're not retaining, maybe that's a problem you need to work on, right? If you're not, or just reading the information, right? I don't know what it's going to take for some people. They'll run around, they'll join these seminaries and schools, and all of a sudden they think they're like the masters in Greek, masters in Hebrew, right? Yet they've never even read, let alone responded to, arguments in Hebrew and Greek that defeat their view. And yet all of a sudden, what? We're supposed to just ignore everything we've done to this point you haven't responded to and say what? Oh, you went to school and you got a degree in Greek, but you can't explain my arguments to me. You get everything wrong, and I actually know more than you most of the time, if not all the time. And you can try to prove me wrong, okay? I've been out here doing this for a long time, so I don't need to hear these people coming in and saying these things that are pretty ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Even people with credible education, right? Okay, so you are a master of Greek. Let's just accept it. You Trinitarians, all of you, let's just give it to all of you. Okay? All of them. You're a master of all these languages, every one of you. I'm going to grant that right now. You know more than all of us. Okay? We'll just get that out of the way right now. Now, I want you to use all that mastery of Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, Syriac, Coptic, Ethiopic, you name it. Give it all to you, okay? English too, you're masters over all of us. So you can stop throwing your education right in our face like the hypocrites in the New Testament do. Okay, we're going to grant it to you all right now. Just knock it off, okay? No matter what we achieve, you win on that. Now, Einsteins, explain everything. You see, knowing all these things doesn't mean you get to act like you can't communicate to us. No, if you're so smart, you have to be the masters at explaining all of this to us. You know what I'm saying? What are you talking about? You can't explain this? You can't answer, you can't respond, but you're the masters. Okay, so what's going on? So we're just going to grant you guys are the masters. Now explain, okay? We don't need to hear your qualifications, right? I don't need to hear the qualifications of the Aramaic Bible in plain English. I'm just going to accept he's an Aramaic, Syriac, this dialect of Aramaic master, right? I'm just going to give it to him. I don't care. Now explain this to me, okay? That's all I want to hear. We're not here for you guys to dork around and waste our time like morons and hypocrites. Either you have facts and information and you can communicate it because you are the masters, or you can't. You can't and we can. And what does that mean? It's not about being a master. It's just about being correct, right? That's all that matters. So every time you bring up anything but what shows is correct, you are not a master. Now, let me just show you something related to the master. Pumped up, everyone. Good to see you all. We'll spend a couple hours, questions, talk about a lot of stuff. I'm going to bring up a couple texts we're going to read real quickly. We'll do the American Standard. Oh, yeah. I'll bring you guys up here. Do this real quick. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians 3 for kind of like just an opening text before we get into the Syriac stuff and your questions. It's right here. Good to see you. Okay, good. Here. Oh, I'm going to bring up the thumbnail so I can use, because I put all the translations, pretty much the main translations of, I'll explain what they are, the Peshitta, the Curatonian, and what I'm going to refer to as the Sinaitic Syriac. You might see it as the Sinaitic Palimpsest, which is basically a copy of a text underneath the text that's been recovered. Okay. All right, so we're going to hope that all these masters can just explain it to us, because I'm so sick of their lying, and I don't even care if they're like, I'm going to grant it, right? Fine, you guys can be the masters. You should be the best at explaining this, and I shouldn't have these constant questions that go unanswered. But we do, and so let's just knock it off, okay? Either you have the information, you have the facts, and that's what being so studious and involved in education has given you, which is the point, or you don't, and you just have the superficial elements, which doesn't matter, right? Did it matter with the Jews? And they were razor sharp. They knew everything, but that didn't matter, right? They didn't have it right. And so that's what matters. Is it correct? That's it. Okay, we don't need anything else. I'm going to show that to you right now. I'm going to show you that this is the standard, New Testament. But first, keep putting that there. Okay, I got the thumbnail up. But let me just check you guys. Let me say hi. Make sure there's no insanity can happen. We know. Brandon, good to see you. And Betsy, always a pleasure. Hanakoma, nice to have you. Unitarian pre-existent subordinationist. Thanks for doing this earlier than usual, Greg. I was going to do it even earlier, but I thought that might throw people off a little, because we usually do it a little bit later than this, but around this time. But I thought, well, it's Saturday, so even people on the East Coast in the United States are 3 hours ahead of me. I'm in California. And then, and I know Betsy's time zone and all that, so it kind of seems like a good time. Doing it earlier in the day gives more people time to see it during that day, but I just don't know that I think a lot of people are, it doesn't fit with them. So either way, I do try different timelines. or times and time zones. So I'll do what I can, but this seemed to be the right way to go. Okay, now Hanakoma, you're doing things. I'm going to put you in timeout, a little timeout for you. We're going to give you a little timeout, right? Let you just dwell on those things, right? Don't bring up people that aren't involved with what we do. And if they don't want to be involved in things that you do, then that's just what you got to accept. But you're welcome to come here. Just take a timeout, put you in timeout. Little timeout right there. Don't worry. Don't get panicked. People get in timeout, right? They do that in sports also, right? Professional people, they can't handle it. You got to give them a timeout. Break, right? Okay, what's going on here? Looks like George. Yeah, George, good to see you. Yeah, I don't know why they think John 8:58 goes back to Exodus 3:14. There's no connection whatsoever. It's just ego. It means pretty common terms, and then that's not what the predicate is in Exodus 3:14. That's not even, well, I mean, I rarely ever hear them say ha'on, or the being, right, is the predicate in John 8:58. They usually just say that the I am is inclusive. It itself contains that. They're just making that up, though. Or if anything, getting that from non-biblical philosophical discussions that involve existentialism in a way they think relates to what the way Jesus talks in John, but it's not the way he talks. It's not the way what he means, right? You can see both in the Septuagint and in John and in other books of the Bible like Mark that ego eimi is used with an understood pronoun or predicate, and ultimately predicate because that's what the pronoun references. It's contextually based every time. There is no time it's not contextually based. Therefore, the expression itself is not the conveyance of the meaning, but simply terms used as part of it, which anyone reading the text would know is a representation of I, he, from Hebrew, Aramaic. And so the context would have already made them aware of who the subject is in a way that wouldn't need to be expressed in every case. Sometimes you might find, like in the Septuagint, sometimes they'll use terms like autos, ego eimi, autos, I am he. So, but that's not common. It's more common, I think, to either have a predicate like theos or huios, tu anthropou, son of man, or just have it not used, right? Like with John 9:9 in the blind man. Like I said in my Made Easy video, you've got 4 uses of ego eimi without an express predicate, a noun or a description of the subject. So I is the subject, right? If you don't, for those of you who are kind of new to this stuff, even though it's not a Made Easy video, still, ego is I, right? Probably hear it more often as ego. And then eimi is verb meaning am. And so I am. Now, autos means he. In some uses, it can mean the same, but in this case, it would mean he. So, but again, that's not how it's used. Not in John 9:9 and not in most cases. I don't think in none of the key texts in the New Testament, and I think a couple in the Old Testament, some manuscripts of the Septuagint. So you'll have it most often, though, not expressed. It's understood. And then, like I said in the Hebrew, it is expressed usually as a pronoun. But it can also be the actual noun. That's the subject of the text. So in the Old Testament, right, you have these texts where it's often Yahweh who's identifying himself, right? He's the subject. He's the one at issue. He's the one making the issue. Usually about him, right? And what they're not doing or failing, what they need to do, and how he's not going to fail, right? So he's the one talking most of the time in all these texts, even if it's the angel, right? We already know this. It's God talking through the angel, right? Jesus even said that. We read that in the Made Easy video, John 8:58, where in John 8:24 through 28, 29. He says that. He said, I don't do anything on my own. I only do what the Father taught me. Okay, so right there, you've got God, the Father, the one God, giving words to someone else. That's an angel right there. There's no other way you can define that. And that being is giving that information to others. Okay, that's an angel right there. There is no other way to define that relationship. Sorry. You can still believe what you want about the Trinity and say it's eternal angel and all this uncreated stuff. It's an angel for sure. That's the function of an angel. And he's a spirit being. On earth, of course, he's a human. But either way, he says he was taught when he was with the Father. The things I heard, I'm speaking in the world. So that's someone else being God through someone else, right? Just like Moses to Pharaoh, and just like the angel of Jehovah in Exodus and throughout the Old Testament. This is the way it works. That's just the Bible. Now, Trinitarians, of course, let's do this text. Let me say hi to everyone. We're going to get to the Syriac, but I want to show you this text, okay? Remember what I just said, how that's the Bible. That's what's written, right? These angels, these intermediaries, even Moses being given God's words, being God to Pharaoh. Jesus saying, this is not my words, not my will. I was taught these things. I'm speaking his words, right? Okay, so then someone else is actually God. And you're just telling us his information, his word. You're the angel. You're the angel of great counsel. You're the only begotten God. You're a spirit. No, you're not a competing God. You're not another God in the sense that you're some other God to us. You're the Father. You just told us that. You're speaking his words. They're not your words. So how could you be another God to us? Yes, he's another person. Moses was another person too, but he was God to Pharaoh because of what God told him to do. All right, Moses couldn't have done any of that on his own. Jesus couldn't have done any of that on his own. I can't do a single thing on my own, he says. John 5:19, John 8:24-28. He says it twice, just like that. And he says it a lot of other ways, a lot of other times. What do we got here? We'll get to that in a minute. We're going to read a text though, right? Don't go beyond things written. All right, so yeah, no, Exodus 3:14. Pankhead, good to see you. Wait a minute, let me see. We have some unusual participation. All right, so we're going to have to remove a person, right? He was collapsing. Good job, Betsy. We had someone who was a little bit, little tipsy, right? Yeah, a little problem there. So we get some people, everybody. We do get them, and they may be nice, right? We hope the best, but we don't know what's going on sometimes, and some people, they're not going to make it, right? Some people are going to just descend into insanity. Everybody out there, just try to relax and be normal people. You'll be a lot happier, right? Okay. That was interesting. All right. Yeah, so, I try to go with it. I try to assume mostly normal people will show up and not collapse, right? Try to find a purpose in life, right? And if you can't find anything worth meaning to you, if you're just completely worthless, then go to the hospital. Okay, go to a retirement community. Go somewhere where people are suffering. Then you'll figure it out. Okay. Everett Commodore, good to see you. Yeah, I'm making sure I'm trying to see what's happening here. Okay. Looks like we've got some order restored. So, yeah, I think we got we'll let that go. People say things. Maybe they get my name wrong and they collapse and break down. I don't know. We also have certain people out there, as we know, right? We've got certain enemies. We've got wolves. We know they're out there. We're going to try to avoid them because they tend to bring everybody down. And I think we've done what we should do. We're going to address the issues, and we don't have a ban on certain people. But we don't need to keep bringing up the already destroyed and annihilated things. It's over. So, okay. Apologista Biblical TJ. Greetings from Brazil. Nice to have you. I hope I didn't skip anybody, but we had a little bit of a breakdown. A little bit of excitement, but not really. It was kind of one of those things. BJ, there, I missed one person. I want to say hi to you. Probably missed a couple more, but we're going to move on. We'll try to keep an eye on that, right? We might have a continuing problem. I've got a few hours, though. It's a holiday weekend. Good to see you all. I've been keeping busy doing things. Got a lot of projects working on. Talk about it more later. But let's just try to kind of ease our way back into a discussion here or there, live here or there, and we'll kind of get back to some of our fellowship videos. But let's try to pick some subjects, maybe do live shows around certain subjects. That'll give us time to just kind of concentrate more and talk about whatever's on your mind. Okay, so let me bring up this text. Now, this relates, and this is going to be right before we get to the Syriac Greek discussion of John 8:58. The heavy stuff. We already talked about a couple things, a couple chat questions. Feel free to put them down. We're going to talk about it. Let me bring you guys up. You got to remember this, okay? This is an important text, something we need to regularly share with people when they try to tell us that the Bible teaches something that it doesn't teach, And by that I mean, okay, so there are things in the Bible that aren't like always clear, and we interpret them sometimes, right? Like even something I think is pretty clear but not absolute, the Jesus Michael identification. I still, as good of arguments as I think there are for that belief, we leave it to people to decide, right? Because we try to be charitable, not burden people with more than the Bible tells us they need to believe, right? So Jesus is called the archangel, 1 Thessalonians 4. He's described in relation to the archangel all throughout the Old Testament, Jude, Revelation 12, and 1. But it's kind of that, we still got to interpret it, It doesn't say Jesus is Michael or in another way, but that clearly. It's close, right? Something that would be like explicit word for word and understood in the context of its expression word for word is one God the Father. And it goes on to say, but there are many idols aren't gods, but there are many gods, those who are called gods and those who are gods. It does not say false gods. It only says the idols are not gods. So either way, Jesus says the sons of God against whom God came are gods, and that if they're called gods, he uses it as his evidence. Greek grammar requires it. Why is he blaspheming by calling himself God's son? So they're sons of God who are properly called gods, even though he's coming against them. He's God's son, and so also a god, therefore theos, and their accusation is wrong. Because it doesn't break scripture. See? Trinitarians keep telling us, oh, well, then you have multiple gods. No, Jesus, first of all, says there's a sense in which others can be gods in his own defense to the accusation he's making himself theos, and says it doesn't break scripture. So right there, we know there's a category of gods that does not break scripture. It's right there. Everyone can read it. It's not controversial. They just won't believe it. That directly fits with Paul's teaching of those who are called gods and those who are gods, even though there's one God, the Father. One Lord Jesus Christ, Lord, many lords. Lords and gods in the first century in Greek were not the same. Talked about that before. But more so, the fact is, Jesus is called Lord in the New Testament because it's to the glory of God the Father. not God the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, not the Trinity, not to his glory, to the Father's glory. Okay, and you're going to see with this whole Aramaic and Syriac and the translations of the Peshitta and the other old Syriac are the Curetonian, Codex Curetonianus, and the Sinaitic Syriac. So you have that there are some who today will popularize translations of the Aramaic into English in ways that they believe support the Trinity, one of which we'll get to Ego and me and the I am connection in a moment with the Aramaic Bible. But in another way they try to do this is with the whole Lord thing and the expression Marya. So in ancient Syriac, Babylonian, you have this expression, Aramaic. You have different forms of this term, one of which is Marya. Mare. Marya, they like to see that. They'll break it up and see it as having Mare and Yah, right? Lord Yah, Lord Yah'ol. So a lot of these Trinitarians who either translate or popularize translations of the Syriac New Testament, they'll try to make this connection with Jesus as Lord and this Marya. But in addition to what I just said, the fact is that Marya is used in those very same texts that I just mentioned, Acts 2:36, 34 through 36, and Philippians 2:11. So they're both, the term Marya just means Lord, okay? So while they do, again, as I said, try to break it up, there's different forms of it. One is Marya, and they try to say that that means Lord Yah. But it really just means Lord. It's the way that Aramaic surrogated the divine name into this term. So it's not meant to be separated like that, and that's how you understand it. Lord Yah. No, Marya means Lord, okay? And it's used of secular individuals in ancient Syriac Babylonian, and it's used in the conditional texts of Acts 2 and Philippians 2, where Jesus is made Marya to the glory of God the Father. So no, it is not an expression that's meant to in any way support the Trinity. And any translations that translate Marya as anything but Lord are lying to you, or they're interpreting, okay? So sometimes maybe translations aren't necessarily lying. They may just believe that's what it means, and they're telling you what they think it means versus what it says. Or even rendering an idiom in a way that you would understand, right? An idiom being a figure of speech in a language that isn't always easy to convey in another language. It's how that's said in that language. And so to translate it into another language, you have to say it differently than you would word for word. John 8:58 is kind of like that, right? A present with a past expression. So it's awkwardly worded in English, right? Before Abraham was, I am. That's because that's bad English, right? That's not how you're supposed to translate. But because they want you to think of Jesus as the I am there, they do it anyway. And because it's word for word what Ego and me says, I am, then they feel okay doing it, you know? But that's not how you translate. That's not what that means. And he's answering a question about how he saw Abraham. So if he says, before Abraham existed, I am, you've got to gather up both of those, the past and the present, into one expression such as I have been. A perfect expression, right? It encompasses the whole period of time from there to here, and then continuing depending on what type of results you have. So that's where this kind of goes with them, right? They want to keep it in this awkwardly worded translation that doesn't show sensitivity to the idiom used in the Greek of past with the present, which many grammars have shown. My JWD editions, I'll show you in a moment. I've discussed them all. I've even shown, I was the first person to show that the Blas, De Bruyne, and Funk grammar actually references John 8:58 in the category of the discussion of the idiom we're talking about. Present of past action still in progress or similar description. Might be a little different in that text. But it's referenced as John 5:58. Okay, so Bowman missed that completely. And he didn't do, I don't think he handled the grammars well at all, as I showed in my response to him. And I've done a lot of work here and documented many things that show, no, this wasn't how the earliest writers after the New Testament understood this expression. This expression means who you are in the context. It's not an absolute expression denoting eternality or the divine name. And that's supported by Greek grammars and Greek grammar and examples that have the same grammar in the Old and New Testament. So it's funny to me when people act like they know more Greek and they understand things better when they don't even realize what I've done or how there are people better on their side, and I've already discussed it for a long time. They just look so stupid to me when they act like, when they clearly don't know any of it, right? But their arrogance, right? Because of the things they've learned or maybe some of their schooling or even degrees, right? Well, it doesn't matter. The people with all your degrees and all your schooling still haven't presented very good arguments. And if you're using I am for any of these texts, you don't have good arguments. Let me tell you that. And I'm going to show that, and I already have. Either way, let's go to this text here. Look what they do. Okay, you got to remember this too. This is very important. First, let me check because we had a little insanity there, right? Oh, man. Hey, Everett, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the super chat. That I know that means, it's not easy for people nowadays. And of course, I do what I do here and I will keep doing it. But thank you. Jacobson. Booker T. Adams. Booker T. Adams, you ask that all the time. I've already answered that. He's not called Godhead there. Read Colossians 1:19. God chose, eudakio, for all fullness to dwell in him. The same fullness that we have according to Colossians 2:10. So I already told you that before. Just read those texts again, and when you can explain Colossians 1:19 and Colossians 2:10, come back. I have a whole video on it. Just type Colossians 2:9 on my channel. Try not to engage Colossians 2:9 and Booker T in the comments. He's a nice guy, but I've already answered this many times. I have videos on it. I have my right. Again, if you're not going to read what I've done, you're going to ask the same questions. That's not my problem. I'm not here to repeat myself. So do the work, do some work, come back. We'll talk about it. George, I know. The plain English Bible is insane. It's crazy, right? It's out of control. So, oh man. All right, we're going to get to it. First this, right here. Look. Booker T, look. Don't worry about Colossians 2:9. Watch this. Look at this. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. No, I'm going to try to be in here a little bit. Okay, so look at this, everyone. We need to read this together, and then we're going to go to the Syriac, and I'm going to explain all the Syriac stuff to you, okay? See if you have any questions, and then we'll finish off with the Greek some more. Look at this, though. This applies not only here, but everywhere. This is very important. So you got the Matthew 13, right? People want to say, where were you? Why? Okay. Well, first of all, we're hidden with the weeds, and we're going until the end together with them. So this idea that the most prominent people in this system, with the dragons going insane and ultimately bringing around Constantine, would represent the wheat, right? Oh, yeah. Well, so where are all the weeds? Down below all these prominent figures? I don't think so. More likely the reverse. Either way, we have textual issues, we have historical issues, and if we have doctrinal issues, that's too many issues. 1 Corinthians 3, okay? New American Standard, starting verse 21. I want you to remember this, okay? Remember this, okay? This account right here. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 21 through the end of that chapter and into chapter 4, verse 7. We're going to read it right now. You're going to be blown away. Okay, if any group, Catholic, Eastern Ortho pagan, any of these Protestant pagans, anyone, doesn't comply with this, it's over, right? Or you tell me, am I wrong in saying that? Look, right here. Verse 21, look at this. So then no one is to be boasting in people, for all things belong to you, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come. All things belong to you. Does anyone see a distinction here between Peter, Paul, Apollos, and everybody else? No. And you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God. Okay, right? Wait a minute. So we belong to Christ. Got it. Understand that, right? That makes sense. We're not Christ. We're not equal to Christ. He's our leader. He's our master. He's our God because he's the Father to us, and he's the Father's image, Colossians 1:15, right? So that's all he could be. He's not his own image. He's the Father's image. So that's the only God he could be to us. John 20:28, verse 17 as well. Christ belongs to God, right? I hate that. I hate when I do that. Okay, so there's no Trinity here. Belonging to God, right? These are people. You, Christ, God. That's not an impersonal nature. No, that's a distinction in nature. Just like with us and Christ right there. Okay, so this is real simple stuff. That goes to the end of chapter 3. Don't forget that, though. Very important. Everyone's the same. Paul, Apollos, Peter. We belong to Christ. Christ belongs to God. No Trinity. Chapter 4, verse 1, right here. This is the way any person is to regard us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. In this case, moreover, it is required of stewards that one be found trustworthy. Verse 3, but to me, it is an insignificant matter that I would be examined by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even examine myself. For I am not aware of anything against myself. However, I am not vindicated by this. The one who examines me is the Lord. Maria. Therefore, do not go on passing judgment before the time, but wait until the Lord comes, who will both bring to light the things hidden in the darkness and disclose the motives of human hearts. That's not the main point. Look at this. And then praise will come to each person from God. That's my thinking. Verse 6. Now these things, brothers and sisters, I have figuratively applied to myself and Apollos on your account. Listen to this. This right here. It's over. So that no one of you will become arrogant in behalf of one against the other. For who considers you as superior? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why did you boast as if you had not received it? Okay, right there. Right there. Did you see that? So that in us you may learn not to exceed what is written, so that no one will become arrogant in behalf of one against the other. What do you have you did not receive? In other words, there's nothing new going on here. Don't go beyond what is written. Now, in this context, you could argue he's talking about the Old Testament. It doesn't make it clear exactly that that's the case. But most likely that would be his primary reference, right? The accepted writings that point to Jesus in fulfillment as the Messiah. Okay, but that still gives us everything, right? So you're not supposed to go beyond any understanding there, right? So the same understanding in Hebrews 1:7 and 14 about angels as spirits. All angels are made spirits, created spirits, sent forth to minister, right? That's not just in Hebrews 1:7, 14. That's from Psalm 104. You're not supposed to go see how they're not going beyond the things written, right? They don't do that. They quote from the Old Testament. They apply it and explain it to Jesus, and that's it. The only text in the New Testament that really clearly says, hey, we got revelation here is Revelation. So, of course, I believe, like most of you, that these are inspired New Testament apostles, Paul, Peter, James, Jude. We accept them as such, right, as Christians, so it's not a big issue. We'd still have to argue for that outside of the Christian community, though, who don't accept that. So keep that in mind. Either way, as I just showed you with Psalm 104 and Hebrews 1, they mean that's the same thing. All right, no one's doing anything new other than applying it to Jesus in fulfillment of these things, and through that providing additional information. You're not supposed to go beyond the written information. So if anyone is going beyond the Old or New Testament and what they clearly teach, right? The New Testament modifies the Old Testament, says you don't have to do this anymore. Well, that's different. You have to look at it, but still, my point is it doesn't change when it comes to like the Messiah, the sons of God, the Father is the one God, right? Jesus literally quotes Psalm 82 in John 10. All of this stuff, it's the same thing. There's nothing new here. It's all right here and nothing new in terms of when Trinitarians and others come to us and interpret these texts, right? They interpret I am. It doesn't say, like we'll read in a moment in the plain Aramaic Bible in plain English, I am the living God in these ego and me texts in John or elsewhere, right? It doesn't say the one God of the Bible is the Trinity. It says the one God of the Bible is the Father, in distinction from the Son, who's the one Lord made Lord, and others who are rightly called gods and lords, but who aren't the one God and who aren't idols. They actually exist, it says. It uses the verb existentially and the term saying they're called gods in 1 Corinthians 8:5, which is what the Messiah is called in Isaiah 9. He will be called mighty God. Right? That's why it says whether in heaven or on earth. You got the sons of God in heaven, the council of God, Psalm 82, and elsewhere, all throughout the Psalms and elsewhere. Consider the spirits of Belial and Melchizedek scroll, century before and leading up to Jesus in the first century. Everything fits. Okay, we don't need to go beyond what's written or the historical understanding. We don't need to interpret it and then use our interpretation as a basis for condemnation. Right? That's not correct. You're going beyond what's written when you do that. If you don't have a text in the Bible that says that the Trinity must be believed as we teach it, or you're dead, right? You shouldn't be saying that. If you don't have a text in the Bible where I am is clearly a divine name and not to be understood as we've been explaining with understood predicates, whether pronouns or subjects in the text, and if you think Jesus is claiming to be eternal by using I am from a point before Abraham, no, that's an interpretation. You understand? The text doesn't say that, right? And the grammar doesn't require that. We've proven that. So what are you left with? Your interpretation, regardless of how good it may or may not be at this point. Doesn't matter. You're going beyond what's written. When you interpret and you Watchtower does the same thing. All these groups are doing the same thing. That's why we just have three things, right? Try going beyond what's written with that. You're going to have a hard time. All right, but these guys are going beyond what's written all the time. Look at this. You're not supposed to become arrogant. Oh, this church father and these church fathers, and we're going to split over the filioque and all this stuff, right? This ongoing schism between these pagan churches and all these people over all this false doctrine, right? This is out of control. And we're made to be like the people who are stupid or don't know things for pointing out the best information that shows what's going on here. So this is very important, I think, everybody. I read the NASB. It's okay. But these were the key things, right? Don't go beyond what's written right there, right? He's talking about himself. They're not doing it. Okay, so if Apollos and Paul and Peter, right? See, they're not going beyond what's written. Why are you Trinitarian pagans? Well, you shouldn't be. We don't need these councils. We don't need these creeds. We never did, right? You guys keep saying, oh, well, this had to be the developed understanding, right? No. Remember right here? Yeah, let's go back because I'm pretty sure he said, yeah, all things belong to you. All things belong to you twice. You're not supposed to be boasting in people. What are you talking about? When I'm going to try to avoid people. When certain individuals keep referencing these fathers and how great they are and all this stuff, right? Regardless of their suspect history and text and all this stuff. And many of them, of course, are hundreds of years after the New Testament, even if they are legitimate. Why are we boasting in these people? Why are we at all, first of all, calling them fathers? We'll do it out of convenience now because all these pagans, but it shouldn't be anything beyond that. Why are we boasting in anyone? Look, if they're contradicting what's written, we just read it, and Paul, Apollos, Cephas aren't doing that, what are you guys doing? Are you insane? Why do we have all these statues, right? Why all the iconography? Now, that's not Mary. That's not Jesus. That's none of these people. That's just something you're not supposed to be doing, right? Why are you teaching anything, in fact, that's beyond what's written in the Old Testament and taught by the New Testament apostles and Jesus? There's no excuse for that. They say right here, they don't even do that. So everybody, we need to be hammering these guys. What are you doing? Why don't you understand Matthew 13? Why, when all things belong to the first century Christians, and we belong to Christ and he belongs to God, and just like Booker T said in the chat, Colossians 2, 9 and 10, we have the fullness of God, all given to us because of his good pleasure, Eudokia, Colossians 19. Okay, so why do we need other people to come along and tell us new things that aren't written? Right? What's going on here? Doesn't seem correct. All right, I wanted to share that with you because we don't go beyond what's written. In fact, that's our whole basis for existence. That we're tired of all these interpretations, whether it's the Trinitarian issues and people and persons and things, or all these other things that, while important and may need to be decided upon, anything beyond what's expressly stated and interpreted by the New Testament apostles, appointed by Jesus and sent forth by him and him, really should never be taken seriously, right? It has to agree with these texts at a minimum. Because these people, as you just saw, 1 Corinthians 3 through 4, they, regardless of who they thought they were, didn't go beyond what was written. So we're not going to go beyond what was written. Now let's talk about the Syriac New Testament and what is written. Let me make sure no one's going insane. Okay, good. Prodigal Truth, good to see you. Okay, good. Now let me bring up my JWD 3rd edition so I can show you guys some information that maybe you don't realize is there. And then we're going to use it as a point of discussion with the Syriac text. Let me just bring that up here. Now, actually, I'm going to have a quick cookie right here. A little cookie. These are pretty good. These are oatmeal cookies. Okay. So, as most of you know, I've written 3 editions. Jehovah's Witnesses Defended, defending primarily doctrines that I agree and share in common with the Watchtower Society, as well as some of the issues related to accusations against them on things like chronology and prophecy, although I also criticize them for things that they have said wrong on those 2 matters, primarily my 3 dissertations on the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. So, bring this up here. Okay. So I've done 3 editions, and in each of them there is an entire chapter on the I am sayings in the Bible that are related to this issue of ego e me, right? So let me just bring up my 3rd edition real quick here. So the latest edition, revised digital, that you can get at Elihu Books right now is from 2012. The digital 3rd edition is the most recent. And people ask me, am I going to do another edition? I don't know. Maybe, because again, it does contain mostly doctrines I share in common with Jehovah's Witnesses. So the title could stay the same if I did a 4th edition. Right. And I still stand behind most of the things I have in all 3 of the editions, even about the Watchtower Society. And again, as I said, there are a lot of really bad arguments against the Society's whole prophecy thing and being a prophet and chronology. So I don't think I would modify really any of those, because those were just me responding to people who were taking things out of context and or misquoting things. But there's more to discuss, of course, and as I said, I do in my 3 dissertations. But in a 4th edition defended, I could probably just keep it the same. That's the whole point of the book, right? I don't have to get into all the negative stuff in a book that's about defending against accusations. So there's a decent chance. I've actually been toying with another idea, but we'll hold off on that right now. Just know that it's not impossible. All right, so this is my 3rd edition digital, as I said, and it's right. So there's a chapter 3 here. It's different in the first 2 editions. It's the 3rd. Chapter 3 is called Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ from Heaven. Right, so I talk about real or ideal. So I get into some of the Socinian arguments and issues from the New Testament to the pseudepigrapha. And then I start to get into the ego e me issues with Jesus and the text in the New Testament. Right, and then so it kind of goes on. And then you notice I didn't really, and in this edition, I took out, you don't see John 8:58 right there, right? Because I wanted to do that separately. In the 3rd edition, I restructured it. It's laid out differently with this chapter. So I just did all the non-John 8:58 texts in John, and then I did the ego e me text in the synoptic non-John Gospels. And then, because they're all different grammatically from John 8:58. John 8:58 is the only text in the New Testament where these ego e me expressions are used that has the kind of grammar that would relate to this issue. So it's different from all these other texts with the ego e me. So I separated them, and then I did this. The 3rd edition is the only one that has this. Right, so this is a brief history. I've done more. I have more information that I could add to this, or I may just do a whole separate book on the ego e me issue. So, but I'm working on a couple other things first. Either way, 3rd edition has this. This discusses the use of ego e me in John 8:58 from Ignatius all the way to Augustine of Hippo. Right, so the early 2nd to the early to middle 5th century. That's a good discussion. And then I get into another subheading in this chapter. The final one is the John 8:58 stuff. right? That's a whole like 20 plus page discussion starting on page 274. Okay? So if you want more information there, all picked up stones and all that stuff, and the view of A, me is absolute, and the whole extension from past, also the potential predicate in Johnny 58 being the Christ, it's all right there, okay? And for those of you, like I had one person post say, hey, what about John 18? Yeah, it's right here. It's been there for 30 years, you know. Where have you been, right? All right, so let's jump forward and go to the text where or the page where I cite the Syriac info on the John 8:58. Okay, so this is page, what is this? Oh, I guess I'm over it. It's page 277. I'll stay on it. Page 277 of my third edition, 2012, Revised Digital. You should get that if you don't have it. It's the most up-to-date and corrected complete. All right, here's where I destroy Maury. It's just one part where he gets wiped out, right? A lot of good stuff here. So this is page 277. All right, so these are some of my notes. Okay, page 278, where I wanted to go. All right, here's a grammarian, K.O. McKay. Most of us know about him. There are many others who agree with us grammatically on the view of John 8:58 that we have advanced and discussed in contradiction to not just Bowman, right, but also Harner, right? I've discussed in this text Harner's I am of the fourth gospel and others, right? We already mentioned Maury, others as well. But in note 112, let me make it a little bigger. Note 112 of page 278, it says, but note that the Peshitta, okay, so the Peshitta, let me just break into you a little bit about the whole Syriac thing now. All right, so this note right here, I wrote this note initially, or one like it, back in the mid-90s, okay? This was when I was at the peak of my Hebrew studies. I either had or was about to take my first course in formal biblical Hebrew, which I hadn't completed it. I was studying under a fluent Hebrew speaker, Mark Geip, and others I regularly associated with and spoke with, like Hal Flemings and others. Although, really, it was just more conversational with Hal, and he's a good guy, as far as I know. Very, very knowledgeable of Hebrew as well, and I believe he even teaches it, right? So I've been associated with and around and learning under people who speak and teach Hebrew for 30 years. I have studied Hebrew formally and informally for 30 years. I read Hebrew almost every day, some of it, either from my grammars or texts that I'm studying. I have a Greek, Hebrew, and now Latin grammar that I read from every single day, part in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon if I can, and then definitely in the evening. You have to. Sometimes I got, several years ago when I was just busy with stuff, I wasn't able to stay as studious, but, I still retained all the knowledge. Once I got back involved in biblical studies, I still have it all, and I've learned it all, and then some. And I'm continuing to learn more, both formally and informally. So I'll tell you more about that later. But nevertheless, back when I was studying Hebrew at my peak in the mid to late 90s, first edition of JWD that was published came out in 1998. I had actually written a pre-published edition in 95. It was very active after 1990. So either way, I think I took my first Hebrew course in 97. Either way, I also, at the time when I prepared this note right here about the Syriac Peshitta, I had seen the translations of the Syriac referenced by Watchtower and Hurley and others. But when I was doing this book, I knew I needed to understand the words, right? And I also had Rolf Ferrulli, who verified on the second edition. I think at the point of the second edition, Rolf and I were very involved with each other. And so I ran a lot of this stuff by him as well. He's also very knowledgeable in Semitic languages. So I was able to, at the peak of my Hebrew studies in the mid-90s, learn the Syriac alphabet and how to read it and how to isolate words and terms so that I could look up terms and expressions. I have Syriac grammars, Syriac dictionaries. I don't spend a lot of time or really any time nowadays other than recently with this and going back over it with Syriac directly because I'm too involved with Greek, Hebrew, biblical Aramaic, right? Syriac of these New Testament texts like the Peshitta, the Curetonian, the Sinaitic. It's a dialect of biblical Aramaic. Okay. So it's not exactly the same. But I'm more familiar with biblical Aramaic from books like Daniel and otherwise written in Aramaic and Targums. I have all of the Targums in Aramaic and the English translations. I also use those as part of some of my discussions of Targumic readings in the JWD editions. But I don't really regularly familiarize myself with biblical Aramaic or Syriac vocabulary, and I don't regularly read them. I do study them like I am describing now and have done and will do whenever I need to. And I'm functionally capable of doing that, no problem. But I don't study them to the extent that I do Hebrew, Greek, or now Latin. I've been studying Latin very seriously since about November of last year. So like 8 months, I guess, almost 8 months. But I'm not going to really speak authoritatively or even extendedly on Latin for at least another year and a half until I've got at least 2 solid years totally completed. And I'm learning a lot. There's a lot going on here. It's really good. And I'm correcting myself because, of course, pronunciation in Latin it's changed over time, right? So even the C, it's easy for me to see a Latin C and pronounce it with a S sound when it's more of a K. But then we have terms and names like Cicero, right? Because it's changed at different times. I know the Catholic Latin is different. So I'm learning a lot. It's coming together. But, really, Hebrew and Greek are the 2 languages I've studied really seriously and formally for 30 plus years. And then relatedly, biblical Aramaic, some minor Syriac like I just described so that I could put notes like this in here and confidently know, okay, this is what these texts say in the Syriac translations. Right, so in terms of the Syriac, we have the Curetonian and the Sinaitic Syriac or palimpsest. Those are considered the old Syriac, okay? Because they're, about a century at least earlier considered than the Peshitta. The Peshitta Syriac is what's considered the more standardized Syriac text of the 5th century. Okay, so it's not as old as the Curetonian or the Sinaitic, but it's more complete and it's more standardized. So now when I wrote this note here, I wrote that the Peshitta uses the time-indifferent participle of existence, ite, as it contains the rendering ina, itai, which, similar to the English participle, must take its time from the context, very similar to the grammar and the expression ego eimi in Greek. Okay, so that's what the Peshitta says. Ina, ite. However, the Curetonian has an excellent translation, I'm reading the note, that preserves the present and past elements found in the Greek. Ina, ite, hawite. I, is, was. Okay? Now that's very important because so you'll be able to see, and if you look on the thumbnail, I'm going to show it to you in a moment again, you'll actually see that additional word. I've underlined the key expression in the Peshitta and in the Old Syriac on the thumbnail. So the Peshitta actually says pretty similar to what the Greek says. The Greek says, I am, the Peshitta says I is, basically. But the old Syriac, the Curetonian, now, okay, so, well, the Curetonian, I don't think contains this part of John 8:58 or John 8, but the Sinaitic palimpsest does. And it says, and it together with the Curetonian, they're more fragmentary than the Peshitta, but they still have good portions of the gospel texts, and none of them have the full New Testament. So the old Syriac reading, the combined reading derived from the Curetonian and from the Sinaitic Syriac, says, I is was. Very clearly understanding it to mean existence from the past to the present, not as a divine name or even an eternal expression. Wouldn't seem to make sense to me based on that wording. And even the Peshitta, the later but standardized reading from the 5th century, is the same as the Greek, which together with the past expression, that's really the key here. As I explained in my overall discussion, okay, of John 8:58, in terms of the, and I also note here that one late Greek cursive, 157, actually says, I was. And this is where I was referring to. Remember, I think Sam one time recently said that I said that that if it was a past referring expression that Jesus used, it would mean he was eternal. But I have this note right here that shows that's not the case. He was trying to make an issue out of ain, right? And the whole was. But there's one late cursive that I saw right here that shows that that would just be the same thing that's being described in John 8:58. So clearly that's not what I believe, nor have I ever said, but he said it anyway. It's crazy. But we all know what's going on there, or maybe, right? Who knows? Either way, so I get deep into the Greek in this discussion, but don't forget this note, right? Note 112. It'll at least give you the fundamental elements and differences, right? So you got the Peshitta reading, ana, ita, ite, or itai. And then you have the old Syriac, represented by the Curetonian Sinaitic. Ina, ite, ha, wite. I is was. Okay, so now when we pull up the thumbnail, so just remember that actually before we do that, if you the real deep details of the Greek, we can get into it if you have questions, but it's all right here. And page after page, full history of interpretation, right? So I'd encourage you, if you haven't read my chapter on John 8:58 and the I Am Sayings in any of my editions, first, second, third, well, you really need to do that. Even if you don't agree with me, you'll at least understand better what we believe and why, and hopefully it'll better inform your understanding. Okay, so now let me bring up the thumbnail and show you a little bit more what I'm talking about. Right? And actually, I'll put that, let me do one thing real quickly here, because again, I know people, right? I know these people are. So let's see here. Okay. So we want to check, right? We want to check. Okay, it looks like we're not having a collapse. So that's good. Okay, just making sure. Back to the thumbnail, right? All right. So I showed you what's going on in my JWD editions and how I did account for the Syriac reading, both the Peshitta and the Old Syriac, and how they both support what we're saying. The Peshitta is basically the same as the Greek, but the Greek supports what we're saying, right? It's just more literal, and so it's not as obvious as the Old Syriac in terms of the existentialism being conveyed, right? So if we bring up the thumbnail right here, so this is the thumbnail I used for today. You can see on this thumbnail, on the left side, I have John 8:58, Peshitta Syriac, right? And then below that, I have the Peshitta Syriac. And then I underlined the Peshitta Syriac reading that's at issue, which says, I is. Then on the right, I have John 8:58, Old Syriac, which I have presented below from the Sinaitic reading of John 8:58. And I've underlined the key part. And you can see, if you look in a comparison, right, you can see on the far left, you have two terms. Ina ite. And then on the right, you have three terms. Ina ite hawite. Right? Oh, I'll just take myself off. So you can see that extra term. I is was on the right. Now on the left, you can see I've listed English translations of the Syriac Peshitta of John 8:58, Ina ite. We have the one at the top, G.D. Bauscher. And this is the plain English, right, Bible. We'll get to it more in a moment. It's the one I talked about a little more in the Made Easy John 8:58 video. And that is just beyond imagination when it comes to its distortion of the Bible. So here's what it says. The reading right here, the first one right below, Syriac Peshitta translations of John 8:58. See? Before Abraham would exist, I am the living God, right? In all capitals, you see that? That's an English translation from the Aramaic Peshitta, but the Aramaic Peshitta does not say, I am the living God, right? No, it just says, I is. So we've got a Bible translation here that's taking extreme liberties and promoting its interpretation and false doctrine, as we know. But it doesn't matter. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to inject. This is what happens, right, with some of these guys and the dishonesty. So we know, as I'm going to show further in a moment, this Bible is gone. Aramaic Bible, Aramaic New Testament in plain English is insane. Right? So that's unacceptable. I am the living God. Then below that, you have J.W. Etheridge. These are all Bibles you can easily look up. Just type the name you see right there. Syriac translation. Translation of Syriac. They'll come right up. Probably a copy of their translation or where you can get it. And if they're too old, there's reprints. And you can find out anything you need to know about these authors. We'll look at more of the plain English translator in a moment. J.W. Etheridge. These are well-known, established translations of the Aramaic, the Peshitta in this case. Before Abraham was, I am. Okay, that's okay, right? I am, I is. James Murdoch. That before Abraham existed, I was. So Murdoch's English translation right there, the second from the bottom on the left, uses a past term, was, for the present in Syriac, ite, is. Why? Because I is, ina ite, is used together with a past expression before Abraham, which is exactly why in the Greek, you don't translate it as I am. No, you translate it just like Murdoch did from the Syriac because it's the same as the Greek. I was or have been is better, as you're going to see, because it captures both the past and the present in one expression. Last one, George Lamza. Most of us know about that one. It's more popular, a little more controversial, but that's just because a lot of these Syriac, Aramaic guys get a little wacky, some of them. or just have extreme views, right? But we have to evaluate them based on what they're saying in their translations. Okay, I don't care how crazy they are, what people want to say about them. We're going to read a little bit about the plain English guy in a moment, but the bottom line is you either have arguments and a basis for your translation and what you're saying, or you don't. Okay? I don't care how crazy, how well-educated, how uneducated, how normal you are. If you don't have arguments that you can make sense and we can verify, gone, right? Lamza, before Abraham was born, I was. Once again, we get an Aramaic translation into English using I is for I was for I is because of the before Abraham. So if we move over to the right, Old Syriac, then you have the Syriac, then the subcaption, John 8:58 Curatonian Sinaitic Old Syriac translations. I got two of them here. And I've got them right here, right? I have a reprint of Agnes Smith Lewis's, right? So she and her sister found the Sinaitic palimpsest, right? The Sinaitic Syriac, and she translated it, okay? You can get it. Now, this is hard to find originally. It was in like the 1890s. But you can get a reprint, okay? And it basically, kind of, this one reprints the actual, like, book. I don't know if you can see, like, the outline. Like a photocopy of the book, okay? You can get this on Amazon easy. And so that's a copy of the A.S. Smith that you're going to see on there. And this is a photocopy I made of Burkett's translation of the Old Syriac back in the mid-90s. When I was going, this has both the Syriac and the English with some notes. This is Burkett's. And that's Agnes Smith. And so here they are again. Look on the right. You'll see the two English translations. Look at what they say. Burkett, before ever Abraham came to be, I was. Okay, so Burkett translates ina ite hawite, I is was, the same way that Murdoch and Lamza translate ina ite, I is in the Peshitta. So is Burkett like omitting something? Not really, right? Because the Old Syriac says both, is and was. And Burkett obviously can see that it's before Abraham, I is was. So we don't talk like that in English, you know? We don't say I is, or even when we're referring to a past time, I am. We don't talk like that. That's why it's bad English. So Burkett is just, he sees they're both there. I is was, but was is enough. Was is enough for Burkett to convey the meaning that Jesus saw Abraham rejoice, because before Abraham came to be, he is was. Right. That's what he's saying. And then the way you render that in English is I was or I have been. Now, if you look at A.S. Smith, that I just showed you a reprint of, look at how she translates it. Before Abraham was, I have been. That's right, Trinitarian. That's exactly how the New World Translation renders it in the last part. I have been. The translation you guys ridicule and have demonized for decades, right? Yeah. So a Syriac scholar, a Bible scholar, A.S. Smith, understood the Syriac, the Old Syriac, that she helped find to mean I have been. Okay, and Burkett and Murdoch and Lamza all understand the Peshitta and Old Syriac as I was. Etheridge just does a more literal, that's not good English, I am, that we see most in English from the Greek. But G.D. Bauscher shows up and goes completely insane, does he not? Right? I am the living God. Oh, Okay, because yeah, Bauscher, GD Bauscher. I hope I got your name right, and I don't really care at this point because you're crazy. Yeah, no, because you've now collapsed Aramaic studies, and we have to resurrect them, right? We have to bring credibility back. We have to completely expose the Aramaic Bible, New Testament in plain English by Bauscher because of this insanity and lies, right? And now let's take a look at what he has to say. That up here. Where's that? There we go. I'll just search it then. For some reason this link isn't coming up that I had for Bauscher, but I'll just search it then. That should bring it up. Let's see. So just bear with me one moment, and I'm going to read a little bit from the Aramaic Bible in Plain English's materials. I'm going to have to search. Looks like this link I had is not activating. My apologies. Only a slight diversion, though. Okay. There. Let this load for you guys, and then I'll bring you in. Thank you for joining me. I'll get to your questions if you have any in a moment, and then we'll wrap it up. But I wanted to do a show. I haven't done a live with you guys in a while. Wanted to go over the whole John 8:58 in any extended Greek manner, or in discussing the Aramaic Syriac readings and translations. Right, so I'm going to show you a document from the translator of the Aramaic Bible in plain English, or the original Aramaic New Testament in plain English is what its title is, but it's also referred to, I think, on the Bible Hub as Aramaic Bible in plain English. Check you guys there. Okay, good. I'll bring you guys up. Here. We can skip that, right? Let's read a little bit about this translation, right? It's available online. I'll put the link down below, but if you just search the Aramaic Bible in plain English, and or the translator, which is Reverend Glenn David Bauscher. Make this a little bigger. Maybe a little too big. That's good. All right. Well, this is who I'm referring to. Now let's take a look at some of the material that came with this translation in the online document. This is copyright 7th edition, 2012. Looks like it first came out in 2007, edited by Timothy Mitchell, Lulu Publishing. Okay, so this is that translation, right? The one you saw at the Bible Hub the other day in the Made Easy video, and then what we've been referencing. So it's got this little introduction. Translation what the author believes to be the original Aramaic New Testament, written first by the apostles and evangelists. So these guys, well, many of them, and this one in particular, they believe this is like the Peshitta, the standardized Aramaic Syriac New Testament or Bible in the 5th century, but certainly the New Testament in this regard. What we're focused on, not the whole Bible. So the Peshitta in the 5th century standardized the New Testament for the Syriac Christians, which previously had, Syriac translations, but were like the Curetonian or the Sinaitic Palimpsest. Now, before that, I should say also, right before the Old Syriac, you may have heard me before reference a text by Tatian called the Dia Tessaron, which is supposed to be from the 2nd century, late 2nd century, that mid to late, I guess, that is like a harmonized gospel that isn't just one of the gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or its own. It's a harmonization or a combination of a lot of the texts or readings from the 4 traditional gospels, and was originally written in Syriac. But we don't have it, okay? We have the text and a commentary on the text from a Syriac Christian, Ephraim, in the mid to late 4th century, okay? So we can't really use the Dia Tessaron the way we might like to, right? We had like a 2nd century copy, or even a 3rd century copy. It would be older than the Old Syriac. But you should know that even the Old Syriac, right, shows signs of being from or related to the Dia Tessaron of Tatian, as does the Peshitta, right? So you have different readings in certain cases. None of these different readings say what the Bible, the Aramaic Bible in plain English says in I am the living God, okay? No. But you do have, so you have harmonizations or differences in accounts that are supplied elsewhere. For example, in John 4:24, I believe, where it says, Jesus says, God is a spirit. Those worshiping him in spirit and truth will do so. That's not in the Old Syriac. But it is in the Old Syriac of John 3, right where he talks about being born again and what's born from spirit to spirit. He refers to the Father. In John there, the Old Syriac has the part from John 4:24 in context in part of John 3:6 or so. So you have different readings like that show that they're not really translations of the standard Greek texts that are for the 4 Gospels, okay? So the Syriac history and transmission has its own peculiarities. And if you don't understand them, and I do, I understand it pretty well, actually. It just doesn't come up a lot. I've been doing textual criticism and reading. I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. These guys are crazy. But I do want you guys to have confidence, so I just try to tell you what I know and why I know it, and then show it. But I do know these things, and so when I see these guys getting up here talking about stuff, it makes me laugh most of the time, because I can see they don't know what they're talking about. Many of them don't. There's a couple guys out there that are okay, but most of them are just gone, right? Anyone who reads the Aramaic Bible in plain English, like we're looking at right now, gone, right? You got to immediately cross them off. It's over. Okay, so I wanted to give you that little kind of brief extra discussion on the history of the Dia Tessaron and its relationship to the Old Syriac and Peshitta, okay? So let's go back. To this crazy, insane Bible. The old original Aramaic New Testament in plain English. This guy's gone, right? So he did this interlinear thing, right? Again, I'm just going to accept, again, I don't care. We'll just say he's a master of all languages, Aramaic, Syriac, all of it. Good for you. Right? He doesn't think, I don't agree with him at all when it comes to Greek and its usage. Some of the things he says are okay, but he goes way too far. Some of these Aramaic guys are a little bit extreme. I think it's pretty clear that Greek was more well-known than he talks about here. Either way, that's a common misunderstanding. I don't think he really understands Josephus here, but either way, I'm not here to get into all that right now. So this part of his preface, right, talks about this stuff. So, so many things, it's not like he has no information or no value, but it's just, you'll see. They say things, right? Some of it's true, some of it's a little overstated. Syriac Christians and all this stuff. Sam gets into this sometimes too, right? He likes to pretend he knows a lot about it. He knows more than some. But others below Sam don't know. They're gone. Trust me, they're out of control. It's over. So, okay, so he talks about that translation right here, the living God, right on page, what is this? Page 6 It's interesting. Right here he says, one question many ask about the Aramaic text is, let me see if I can make this bigger. It gets too big there though, huh? Whatever. Yeah, forget it. I'm going to go back. He says, one question many may ask about the Aramaic text is, are there major differences in this text as compared to other translations? The answer is that about 95% of the text is the same as other New Testaments, but the 5% difference is really interesting. Oh, you bet it is, right? Significant and powerful 5% content. He says right there, let me give an example from Mark 14:61 through 64. This is the account we were talking about in my Made Easy video that I uploaded the other day, where he was before the high priest, right? He's talking about being the Son of Man, exactly like in John 8:24 through 28, which is exactly what's at issue in Acts 7 with Stafford and how they stoned him for his belief about Jesus, the Son of Man, right? They ignore all of it. So back to this. So he's given us an example, right? The 5% difference, it's not 5% of just textual differences, right? No, it's 5% gone, right? Out of control. So he's given us this example of how it's different. And how is it different? I am the living God. When all he says, as we talked about in my Made Easy video and earlier in this video, is I am, with the understood predicate being the Son of Man. Are you the Messiah, Son of the Blessed One? I am. No, I'm not it doesn't say, oh. Okay, everyone, so we have these people, remember that, right? They're out there, and they're translating, right? Don't let this fool you. Just accept that they are the masters of every language they claim. Now make them prove it to you so you can understand what the heck they're talking about. Because no one's going to be able to explain to you why it says the living God here, except to tell you they're interpreting it based on the use of the expression in the Old Testament, the way that they misinterpret, but that doesn't have anything to do with the use of the expression in this context if you just interpret the text in its context. No, Messiah, Son of the Blessed One. Behold, the Son of Man. No, it's not, I am the living God. Okay, look at what he says. Do you see what I mean? No, you're crazy. Our Lord used the Aramaic phrase, enana, which signifies a divine utterance in 90% of the phrases found in the Peshitta Old Testament. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord who heals you. Yeah, that's not what he's talking about in this text. Mark 14:61 through 64. He's talking about being the Son of that one. No, he's talking about being the Son of Man who sits at the right hand of that one. It's unbelievable, everyone. It's out of control is what it is, okay? Then he shows us, he cites this other text. He's citing it from John 18, right? Where these guys go crazy again. Yeshua said to them, I'm the living God. They went backward and fell to the ground. No, he doesn't say I'm the living God. They ask him. He says, who are you seeking? Right here. They were saying to him, Jesus the Nazarene. I am he. Predicate stands for, who are you seeking? Jesus the Nazarene. No, they're not talking about him being the living God. No, they're not talking about him in any way other than that they're seeking Jesus the Nazarene. Is he answering their question? Yes. What's his answer? I am he. Who is he? Jesus the Nazarene. The guy didn't hold back at all. He came right out at us, stridently, identified himself. Yes, I'm he. Right, they're not used to that. It took them aback. It's very obvious. It even happened earlier in John in other accounts. Have you read that? You might want to get my writings and read that. And then start from there, since it's all condensed. And you don't have to spend as much time as you actually should with the text. Right, so this is just pure insanity, everyone. Craziness. Remember I told you my Made Easy video. They go outside the text, context, to a whole nother text, context, and add words that are not in the text. Out of control. Unbelievable. Now, there's all this other stuff, right? You can look at this if you want. I'll put a link below. He gets in the whole Maria thing here, blows it, right? Doesn't understand the qualified usage. doesn't explain the truth about the use of the expression as just meaning Lord, okay? No, they have to try to break it up and make it seem like it's something it's not. And then he adds the word, divine name, to every time it uses Lord, even Acts 2:36, even Philippians 2:11, contingent uses of Lord, Maria. No, it's not Yahweh. It's someone who's been made Yahweh by Yahweh, Maria. So they're just misunderstanding the Syriac term for Lord, Aramaic term for Lord. And then, mistranslating once again. They should just use the divine name if they're going to use it in place of Maria, because if they're not going to make it mean Lord, okay, it's either the divine name or Lord, Trinitarians. And even if it's the divine name, according to the Syriac, okay, so he's made the divine name. He's given the divine name, which we ought to know, Revelation 3, 1 through 12, game over, no Trinity. Right? He's given the divine name, Philippians 2, game over, no Trinity. Isaiah 43, 7. He creates beings and gives them his name for his glory. The exact words of fulfillment is in Philippians 2, 9 through 11. It's over. Right? It's so over, everybody. So Maria, don't let him fool you on that. No, it's not Lord Jah, unless it's about Lord Jah, but it's still Lord, and he's Jah. So you don't make Jah Jah. You understand? So just point out Acts 2:36, Philippians 2:11, when this whole Maria thing comes about. They're gone. Right? And then he gets down here. This guy's crazy. He goes insane with all this codes, right? Bible code guy. He says there's exactly 18,474 letters between each of the 24 code letters above here that he says gives this expression. You got to be careful with these guys. I'm telling you, gone. God doesn't write things in those ways so that you can try to come up with a calculation in these ways to try to figure things out that don't involve the Holy Spirit. Sorry. Gone. Right? We've all seen it. We're seeing it. Now we got to believe it. As hard as it is. All right. So now he gets down here. This guy's gone. You got to understand. I read the whole thing. He's insane. But when he gets down here, he starts to attack the Hebrew and Greek people, right, in the text. Guy's gone. Right? He gets into this whole thing. He was like converted when he went to a funeral. If you look up, we'll just skip his whole, there's like a few bios about him. Just look it up online. I have him here. Maybe we'll pull one up, but my links weren't working from that document for some reason. Anyway, if you look at his comparative first century Aramaic book, it's got, if you just look it up online, type his name, comparative first century Aramaic, it's got like a bio about him where he talks about how he was converted by God at someone's funeral, as an early teen. And, whether or not this is true or not, I don't know. But I'm highly suspicious of those things, especially when they come complete with translations that don't relate to the complete text that we have. Don't even represent them at all according to the context that we have. So, where does he go? Let's go back here. Real quickly, he said, I did receive powerful divine guidance, inspiration, help, and confidence in the work. That does not mean I did perfect work, as I know there are errors of all sorts in the translation, right? He's kind of doing a watchtower thing here, right? A little bit of a watchtower thing going on here. Look at that. These are, and people, it's over. I did receive powerful divine guidance, inspiration, help, when even if that's true, even if you feel like as a translator, that's how God's using you, to say that is inappropriate because you can't prove it, and you're throwing this superhuman element out there about your work that should stand on its own and not be tainted in relation to God, where you even admit it has errors on your own. Okay, so just knock off the whole inspiration thing, okay? Especially with your horrific translation, it's over. What it does mean, as I see it, is that God is pleased with the results, and this translation effectively represents his intended meaning and purpose in writing to us in the first century through his apostles and evangelists, right? This guy's crazy. The kind of readings he's presenting and making these claims, that's crazy. Right? And just look, he goes on. And then right here, look at this. It's this last part right here, right at the end. He goes, let me take myself out. Right here he goes, with God's help, inspiration, encouragement, I've completed 2 translations of the Peshitta New Testament. I'm in the process of translating the Peshitta Old Testament. Can't wait to see that, right? Whoa, we got to see Exodus 3:14 there. I've done a rough translation of 90% of the 300,000 words of the Tanakh, about 270,000 words in an interlinear translation. The Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes have been completed and published in an interlinear edition. And again, go ahead and just don't contest this. There's no reason to. Anyone who claims they know what they're talking about should be able to communicate it to you. And if they can't, they don't know what they're talking about. I don't care who they are. And if they can communicate it to you and you can see what their arguments are, that's all you need, right? So there you have it. And then look, final part. I can also say that I have endeavored always to honor the triune God. You see how these people are? They think they're honoring God with these blasphemous translations that literally disrespect the wording and meaning of these texts, including the Syriac. These guys are crazy. And believe my translation glorifies the author of all scripture. Right? And then he goes insane here. Bunch of blessings where he goes crazy. You know, right? All the Trinity stuff. So, you know, this is someone who has collapsed because of the Trinity, right? We've saw God logic destroy himself with the Trinity. Sam has destroyed his whole life because of the Trinity, right? Unbelievable stuff, right? Some people in Watchtower wouldn't even be in Watchtower if it wasn't for the Trinity, right? The Trinity has destroyed so many people, right? With all the arguments and controversies and crusades and lying and idols and statues and oh my goodness, right? Translations that promote Baal instead of the divine name Yahweh. No, we get Lord in place of Yahweh. Oh, and then we get misuses of Maryah. Oh, and then we get misuses of I am, right? Pagan existentialism, not biblical existentialism or a divine name. So they're gone, everyone. It's game over pretty much. But we still have new people we need to help, right? So we can see now we have people here. We can see we have people here. What do we have? I'm looking at the chat here. Let me see if we have some people who should be gone. I'm sensing that, right? Of course, I don't want to distract too much. We were on fire there. What we can see, though, we have, Ramel Prince has gone insane. Okay? So bye-bye, Ramel. You chose to come here and look at all those comments, right? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This guy went insane. Good job, Bankhead, for tolerating just pure insanity, right? Wow. So you can see, everybody, we've got people who come here, you know, and they don't listen, right? You may wonder, why, Greg, if you've been publishing a whole chapter where you talk about all these things, Greek, Syriac, Hebrew, Aramaic, on I am, throughout the Bible, why, if you've been doing it for over 30 years and writing in debate and videos, why don't they listen? Why don't they ever learn? Well, because they come here and collapse, right? To learn would mean they'd have to become responsible to the one God and his firstborn son, the only begotten God. They're not here to do that. They're here to promote false doctrine, right? So that's what they're going to do. That's why they lie to you about the Syriac. Just remember, everybody. Remember, this thumbnail, just carry it with you. It's pretty convenient, right? Maybe I'll make this into a tract. I'll get rid of the title. Yeah, I'll make this into a new cwjaw.org tract. We haven't done one of those in a couple months. So I'm going to change this a little bit, add a little more information, remove the title, and I'll make this a nice little usable printout for you guys, okay? And then once it's totally done and on the cwjaw.org site, I'll also post it in the community section. But the Peshitta Syriac and the Old Syriac both support the proper understanding of the Greek text, which is that Jesus claimed he existed before Abraham and continued to exist from a time before he was born, while he was alive, that's how he saw his reactions, and to the point when he was speaking to the Jews and talking about it. That's why, like with Agnes Smith's translation of the Syriac on the right, I have been is correct, like in the English of the New World Translation, because it gathers up the past before Abraham came into existence and the present I am, and conveys them into proper and understandable English, rather than just leave it nonsensical, whether capital A, am, or non, or even worse, adding I am the living God, right? Gone. But just to add I am, or a capital M, when there's no evidence I am is a divine name or a self-contained expression, meaning that person's eternal. And Greek grammarians, from at least Blas, de Brunner, and Funk, and in my JWD editions, went further into commentaries and other writings to show it's even earlier than that, but even in that, and through to Kenneth L. McKay, and people like me who've studied these things for a long time, and provided examples that no one else provided this whole time in response to the Trinitarian apologist's best writer on this subject of all time. So much so that others who know Greek used my arguments and my examples to do the same thing another time. So I want you to have confidence and use these things. I'll try to make more available to you, so that we can help people, right? If Trinitarians aren't going to listen, if they're not even going to read my stuff, right? And they're just going to follow the Aramaic translation in plain English, just how much time do you want to spend with those people? I recommend none, but if there's someone who might listen, then at least you have information that's usable. And that, together with people who, are just learning, or that maybe people in your family that come to know, then you have tools, right? You have explanations and illustrations that can help you explain some of the more complicated things, It's not so easy to talk about Greek and Syriac and the different Syriac versions, right? So hopefully I helped explain that a little, make it more clear what the differences in the Syriac versions and the relation to the diatessaron is, or maybe, and the whole Syriac side of textual criticism, which I've been aware of and doing a long time. So I have certainly sufficient capacity, and I plan on continuing to do that, plus more. Like I said, I'm heavily involved in Latin right now. That's a good thing. You'll see why as I go further. And so, in any case, let me see if you have any final questions or anything we need to talk about before I wrap it up. I don't want to have to. We had a couple people go bananas, so that's not unusual, but unfortunate, right? One here at the end went totally insane. Let's see. So let's see what is happening here. So la Santa Escritura. You're asking why we blocked your channel or your people for using the name Jehovah. Well, we don't block people for using the name Jehovah. But when you come into a live show and chat and you start spamming things repeatedly that have nothing to do really with the main subject we're focused on, I mean, a little bit of divergence and variance is okay, but like to just go completely insane off subject and distract everybody like that, is that who you are? Is that the people of Jehovah that you claim to belong to? I don't think so. So I would say, no, Sisman, you're correct. You're incorrect. The earliest Christians did not believe in the Trinity. Right? Even the Syriac Christians, they did not believe in the Trinity. And in fact, just one last point here. If you get Burkitt's translation of the Old Syriac, I was noting this earlier as well. If you look at the introduction, we'll end on this. It's a good point, I thought. But in the preface to Burkitt's translation of the Old Syriac, on the preface, page 11, he says, again, the Holy Spirit in the Peshitta is commonly called Spirit of Holiness. But we are scarcely justified in assuming that the two expressions will regard as equivalent in Syriac because they equally represent ta pneuma, ta hagion in Greek, the Holy Spirit. And one with the article and one without is what he's saying. But when we look at the context where the one without the article occurs in Syriac, it is evident that it is definitely not used in the sense of a divine hypostasis. So he goes on to talk about it some more. Either way, you can see here that even others who have translated the Old Syriac see in it indications that don't point to Trinitarian associations, even for the Holy Spirit, which we know was a big problem for the early Christians outside of the New Testament. And as we know, when we started early in this video, 1 Corinthians 3-4 very clearly shows, Sismon, if you go beyond what's written, and you contradict the explicit teachings of the Old and New Testaments, you're not a Christian. No, you're part of a pagan church, okay? So if anything you do or teach contradicts the explicit teachings of the New Testament and Jesus or the Old Testament, you're not a Christian. But we do appreciate your interest in the Bible, and we hope one day you'll stop listening to pagans, okay? That's all you really need to do. Hold your church up to the Bible, and if you see something different, throw away the differences, okay? That's a good way for you to run your group. So do that, come back another time, and we'll try to help you guys further. But we don't block you for using the divine name. We block you for going insane. Now, you can recover from that. Try to be more normal. You don't have to go insane and just post a bunch of stuff that doesn't relate to the topic or that's repetitive. Try to add something to the show. Try to make me want to do more lives, okay, if you enjoy them. Or if not, oh well. And, I think the material we covered tonight pretty much shows that the Aramaic Bible in plain English and any Aramaic Bible in any language that in any way translates Jesus' uses of ego eimi as anything other than I am, I is, was, or I have been, should be completely abandoned and never used again. And if you meet people who cite those translations, just know they're not even qualified to read them. And if they are, you can grant that. They're the master of the languages. Now they got to show you where it actually says those words in those languages. And if they can't do that, so much for being masters. In any case, yes, Betsy, we will continue to pray for Trinitarians, right? Wait, no one's perfect. There are a lot of good Trinitarians out there in the sense that I think they try to do what's right, or they believe they're doing what's right, or some of them, I think, want to do what's right, but they've been influenced by all these translations, right? If you've seen that many texts with I am used in that many different ways that seem to identify someone as this I am, well, you might have a hard time figuring things out too, And if you get translations like the Aramaic Bible in plain English that add whole expressions like that, you're going to be completely confused, wouldn't you say? So it's important that we go over these things, even though we know what the Bible clearly teaches, right? We don't go beyond what's written, what's written or how they were understood. Excuse me. You should take a drink. Well, we're almost done. So for us, it's real simple. But we got to respond to all these people, So these arguments come up. We got people who are new. They don't know a lot of Greek or Syriac. So we've studied these a long time. We try to help people. But a lot of these other people who study these things a long time, they barely even understand what we've been talking about the whole time. So they can't help any people. So wherever you can, that's what I encourage you to do. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time arguing with people about these things. If they're sincere, or you feel it will help other people, or they're just someone who's never heard this stuff before, fine. Load them up, give them all the info, and just let them know that, hey, sometimes, most of the time, it's not going to matter what you say. A lot of these people, unfortunately, gone, right? We hope they come back. We'll pray, we'll try, but we're not going to waste our time. We only have a little bit of oil. We can't just keep doing these things and letting these people spoil our community association and good feeling, right? We'll do it when we have to. We got to stand up and beat a wolf, get a pervert out of here. But we're not here, right, to have to let them interfere with us all the time. So we're not going to do that. And I thank you for your time. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday. I'm not going to be doing a live tomorrow. I don't have anything planned on the horizon. I'm really busy right now. But, I might do something similar. If you have a suggestion on a video, you can put it down. And then maybe from there, we'll do an upload and a live. We'll try to just do like specific issues and text for a while until I get a little more caught up with some projects and some education I'm working on. Then we'll start to kind of grift, maybe after summer, we'll grift back toward the weekly or semi-weekly fellowship shows, okay? But through the summer, at least, I'm going to be pretty busy, so I'll do what I can. But just know, there's a lot happening. And also, may Jah bless you all. Okay, so Sismon, I was about to conclude it right there, and you're making this comment right here. Now, I'm wondering, should I ban Sismon? Well, he's making these comments. I would rather follow Christ our God, the apostles. You don't follow Christ as your God. If you did, your God as Christ would be the Father, because he doesn't do anything on his own. He only does what the Father teaches him. So it's the Father being God through the Son to you. That's the only Christ as God you can have if you believe in the New Testament and the apostles. I don't think you do. And they certainly don't agree with you when it comes to idols and praying to people other than Jesus and the Father, now do they? So you guys have a lot of problems. You enjoy your 2,000-year history of all those problems, of all those weeds, and we'll just sit here knowing that we're part of the wheat. It isn't always easy to see, but that's right there if you just believe and follow one God the Father, one Lord Jesus Christ. And pray for the Holy Spirit to help you, to forgive you, and to facilitate your treatment of others the way you want to be treated. And if they're a pervert, you want to be sure you treat them just like you'd want to be treated if you were a pervert. We don't want to associate with perverts. So we try to avoid them. Either way, try to treat people the way you want to be treated and follow the golden rule. Jesus is the Messiah and one God the Father, Maria. And that does not mean Lord Yahweh. It just means Lord. And he is Lord. Like Jesus said, he's not our one Lord because he wasn't made Lord. Like Jesus says, no Mar Yah. No Lord is Yah. Because Yah is not made Yah or Lord. The two things that Jesus is made both. So if that's your Jesus and that's your Yah, that's your God, you go back to the New Testament. Congratulations. We're all Christians now. So we just better not see any statues, iconography, or prayers to people who aren't Jesus or God. With that being said, may God bless you in Jesus' name. That's right. The narrow way, Betsy. That's the way.